Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Life Interrupted. This is a 5-part series, and today the topic is sports. My name is Bobby Curran. I'm with ESPN Honolulu. I'm the radio voice of the University of Hawaii football and basketball programs. I do the coaches shows, and I'm the host of the eponymous 3-hour sports talk show that is heard all over the World Wide Web, morning times in Hawaii. I want to introduce to you now our panelists, and I want to start with Chris Chun, who is the executive director of the HSSAA. That means he's in charge of the 5 leagues on 4 islands for high school sports. It's a busy job, and trust me, it's been really interesting in these last few months. Next up is Colton Cowell, and Colton is an All-American on our men's volleyball team that was ranked either 1 or 2 all of the abbreviated volleyball season. He is not only an All-American, but he just won the Jack Bonham Award, the most prestigious award for a student athlete at the University of Hawaii. Athletics Director David Matlin is with us as part of the panel. He is a guy that has been really around sports his entire life. He grew up with his father working for the Houston Astros. He got a little work with them too. He'd been around the ticket office before becoming the director of operations for the Hawaii Bowl. So I think you could say kind of a natural progression to his current job. And of course, we have Annie Weese. And you know, coaches, I've always had coaches say, there is no I in team. Well, neither is there an I in Annie, in case you were wondering. But she was a walk-on basketball player at Notre Dame and actually started off as a coach at Oklahoma State. But she, at some point, decided that sports psychology and psychology in general was an interesting turn. She has gone on to leave coaching and get her doctorate in counseling psychology. She is in charge of the student athletes and the mental health and wellness program at Kansas State University. So now that you've met our panelists, I want to start with this. And I just think that because the world turned upside down, especially for sports people, I wanted to find out, where were you and when did you know that your world had turned upside down? Let's start with UH Athletics Director David Matlin.
Well, Dad looks good.
Interesting enough, Bobby, I was with you. We were at the Fullerton Marriott with the men's basketball team getting ready to head to their shoot-around for the first round.
That looks good.
The night before, we were at the women's basketball tournament where the Wahine won their game at Long Beach, but in front of no fans. So I remember seeing you shortly after I got the call that we weren't going to play, and then the next plan was to get all of our student athletes home safely and in the next day or so. So like I said, we were at the Marriott, and once we saw the game starting to get canceled on TV, we knew we were done too.
I knew it wasn't probably a stretch before you realized you were going to have to deal with everybody at either tail end of winter sports or for all of the spring sports.
Yeah, that's correct. It happened pretty quickly. Obviously, you're hoping for the best, but with really in a few weeks, pretty much everything was permanently canceled, and including other events that we had, for fundraising and clinics and camps, and it was just getting on to what we could control at that point.
Well, Chris Chun had to deal with these same issues with the Hawaii high school athletics. And Chris, when did you first realize the magnitude of the problem? When did your world flip?
Well, I got to experience it firsthand as a coach, a parent, and an administrator. I was coaching my daughter's softball team. I was also coaching intermediate baseball at the time. And my son actually was playing baseball for Kaimaki High School, and they were in their spring season. So I got to experience it from 3 different levels, 3 different viewpoints. And I got to see the impact on all 3 things, and it made the severity of it come more real to me. And so when all the leagues came together, we worked well together, and then we postponed the spring. We were trying to save the spring, and then we realized that we had to cancel the spring. And then from there, that point on, we worked on looking toward the summer and the fall of this upcoming year.
Now, Colton Cowell, I believe your volleyball team was on the road when this thing kind of exploded.
That is correct. We were on the road. We had just landed in Los Angeles, and we were at an In-N-Out burger joint 2 days before our first conference match against California State University Northridge. And we had received a notification that the NBA season was being canceled. And for me, understanding the the significance of that event and that season being canceled, I was soon to believe that our season would in fact also be shutting down for the remainder of time.
Well, Annie Weese, because you deal with all of the athletic teams and their athletes at Kansas State, what was your first inkling that things were going to really change?
Yeah, like Colton, when the NBA canceled their games, that was a very sudden eye opener to me. I thought this is something if the professional leagues are canceling their games and their seasons. And we were on spring break actually, so that's usually a downtime for me. And so our spring sports, they were all on spring trips or at their games. Our basketball teams were at the Big 12 tournament at that time. So we were actively ready for matches and games. And I remember when the rowing team had to end their spring training early and hop on flights and come back to Kansas. I knew that this is big. And we kind of remained hopeful. But like David said, it happened so fast. But you hold on to those slivers of hope. Maybe it's just one regatta canceled. Maybe it's just one match. Maybe baseball can still play with no fans, and then very quickly all that was slipping away one by one.
Interesting how some things are changing, but it didn't take long for the focus, I think, became with the student athletes. What were their issues? Where were they going to go? How would you get them acculturated to this change? And David, I don't know exactly what happened there at the University of Hawaii or what the priorities were. Can you tell us?
Yeah, well, the main thing was it's just about communication. So I remember we had a head coaches meeting, and the expectation was that they'd be reaching out to the student athletes daily, as often as possible. A lot of us hadn't used Zoom before this. I would have been one of them. I probably have about 1,000 hours plus on Zoom right now. So a lot of it was, and just making sure they're okay, trying to do some virtual team building activities, get them to get engaged in the community too, by whether it's TikTok videos, because kind of our thought was the more we're helping others, the more it also uplifts us and keeps us in a good place. But a lot of it is really focused on mental health initiatives. We're fortunate that even this year, and it's really paid off, the H.T. Hayashi Foundation gave us funds for mental health that we're able to deploy right now, looking at some app-based solutions, which helps us in this virtual world. So, like I said, at the end of the day, our goal is really the health and wellness of our whole staff. And a lot of it is just through communication and, making sure also that as they're working out themselves, that they're doing it in a safe manner. So there's these are people that are used to being in class, playing all these games constantly, and now all of a sudden they have more time, and it's how they use that time.
Chris, I know that you guys, because you don't really have the mental health or at least the contacts to get to that, that's more of a league thing. And so I imagine you're first gauging, what are the various commissioners of the leagues, where are they at? What was your impression of how they were dealing with it?
Yeah, so they've been doing well working together with us. And what we've been trying to do is we've been trying to stay on top of the latest information from various organizations and pass that down to our leagues, and then they can pass it down to the schools. What we tried to do is try to continue business as normal as best we could. So we continued with our scholarship programs. And I think the best thing we can do for our student athletes right now is to focus on our resources into starting up sports again safely, so they have an opportunity to play. And this includes educating our state leaders that education-based sports for us and like the University of Hawaii are an important part of their socio-emotional health. So we want to make sure that sports doesn't get cut, and that the student athletes don't become a double victim of this pandemic. And also, we've been partnering with the NFHS, our national organization, and they have a crisis text line. So if students they need emotional support, they can text SHIELD to 741-741, and then they'll be put online with a counselor that they'll have that resource available to them.
Okay, I want to do this because Colton, you are on a team. Your teammates obviously all dealt with this differently. Can you just tell us what those first few days were like?
The first few days were very difficult to process. There was a significant level of remorse and just feelings of discouragement, having had no control over the current situation with the pandemic that spread throughout the country and, of course, the world. And for us, dealing with that the best we could was mainly focused on coming together. And before we had found out that we were going to be allowed to come back, it was making those what were supposedly the final moments of being with that individual group of athletes together special, and creating memories and just trying to keep each other positive and in support of each other.
Annie, your job may be the most complex in this regard because with all of the student athletes at Kansas State, I talked to you the other day and you had said spring athletes first, spring season athletes were the first priority.
Yeah, and I expected the most distress from those student athletes who were in their season, who had their seasons cut short or stopped before it even begun. I anticipated that shock, and what Colton is describing is the beginning stages of the process of grief. The shock, the denial, the anger, the sadness, that I expected to be most difficult for the seniors in those spring sports as well. So that's where I targeted. I targeted the track team, the tennis, golf, rowing. I made sure baseball. I made sure that they knew that I was there. Any resources that they may need. I also validated to them that they could be experiencing 1,000 emotions right now. Some of them might be relieved that they can take a break from the rigor of their life. Some of them might be terribly sad. Some of them might be angry. So I just tried to put some names to some feelings that they might be experiencing to validate and normalize that for them.
And I'm guessing that there may have been differences. I mean, between age, freshmen may be different from seniors, possibly, the men a little different in terms of coming for help than the women. What were those things like? Were they the numbers and the kind of help you expected to be asked for?
I think so. I typically get more female athletes coming to me for help and support, and that remained constant. I did see a uptick in the underclassmen, which I expected. I mean, if we even think about the brain development that happens between freshman year to senior year and able to process things and think through things and plan for the future. So that was no surprise to me. Yeah, but what we focused on here at K-State was making sure the team stayed connected, that not to misinterpret social distancing as emotional distancing, providing them opportunities to connect as much as possible.
Okay, I want to interrupt just for a second to give a brief mention to our sponsors. We'll flesh these out a little bit later, but NAMI Hawai'i, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. We want to also thank Mental Health America of Hawaii, Kamehameha Schools, a sponsor, and ESPN Honolulu, and of course, Honolulu Magazine that has really put all of this together. So we thank all of our sponsors. As we continue on, I think there's a couple of different questions that really come to mind. And one of them is, what are the next steps? I mean, I wonder, where is it going? Can you kind of tell us a little bit, next steps forward right now? Let's start with David.
Yeah, well, the next steps for us are really determined on, we kind of focus on our core values. Our core values are, health and safety for our student athletes, our staff, our university community, as well as our fans. And our second one is scholarship and education, our education mission for student athletes, and keeping our people working productively. Also, we got to factor in We have to be very good stewards of our financial resources right now and invest them in the most important areas, because that's going to be a little stressed right now. But really, as far as next steps, we're really implementers. We're not decision makers. The people who are making decisions are federal, state, county, the NCAA for us, our conferences, the university. So what we need to do is we need to be ready, ready to go with different scenarios once we get green lighted. So that's our job. Another big area we're working on is our Carl Clapp, our associate athletic director, and his wellness team. They're working on our return to practice and play protocols, which is a ever increasing long document right now, where we're getting a lot of different best practices from the different conferences, a lot of different athletic directors of different departments. So in short, really, our goal is just to be ready to go when we get the green light.
Chun, with all of those different islands, different leagues, I guess the first thing you guys are looking for is, when do you bring the sports back?
Yeah, so we've been working with various experts and authorities in the state to come up with guidelines on safely reopening sports. We've been meeting with the leagues ever since this thing started. We were meeting weekly to try and see if we could save the spring. We've changed it to every other week, but we're trying to develop guidelines. I mean, we have a sports medicine advisory committee that we've been working with. I've been working with the national organization, and then I've even had weekly meetings with the Western states to see what they're doing. And the Department of Health has been really helpful. We've met with them, various legislators that I've kind of got to meet in my experience, and the Lieutenant Governor has been key in a lot of stuff. But yeah, it's like what Dave said. Dave gave a really good answer, and we're probably going to follow a lot of what they do too as well. So
okay, and I do want to remind everybody that you have a chance to ask questions. So on your monitor, just go to the Q&A button, and you will be able to type in, and we are going to get to those questions a little bit later as we move forward. Colton, I think this is very interesting, because you are part of an unprecedented class, because you were a spring sport athlete, you were a senior, and by NCAA caveat, you are now having an opportunity to come back and play again. Tell me about what went into that decision, and what are the complications and the advantages that results from that?
The process of making that decision, or the decision itself, was very easy for me. I'm from Hawaii. I grew up in Makawao, Maui, and I love representing the University of Hawaii and its athletic department. And the amount of time and effort that I've put into this program has been the most rewarding years. They've produced the most rewarding years of my life thus far. And I feel that on behalf of myself and my fellow seniors, the decision was the easiest step. And then it was the next step, which was a little more complicated, was more so furthering our education, what graduate programs that we were going to need to apply for, given the limited time frame, in addition to what else were we going to incorporate financially into our senior year. And to answer your question regarding advantages, certainly the European volleyball leagues, which each of the seniors were looking to enter post-graduation, they lost a significant amount of their funding. And for us, that was very, very difficult to process, knowing that our future careers were going to be hindered, as are many careers, by this pandemic. And
that's interesting. I think a lot of people haven't even given that much thought yet. Annie, in terms of, the way forward and all of these considerations, from your perspective, where is it going?
Well, I'm going to speak a bit on that decision to take that extra year granted by the NCAA, because just like the initial emotions with all of this, I saw with my clients a range of responses to that offer. Some were relieved to have the year back, some experienced a great deal of distress trying to make that decision. Most of our seniors had some sort of a plan post-graduation, grad school acceptance spots, job offers. And so it's really hard for some of them to think about turning those down. Another thing I think is you prepare in often subtle ways for that last semester, that last day. starting on your first day when you walk onto a campus. So the time in your mind mentally and emotionally is kind of ticking down. So you're preparing for and grieving for that end stage throughout the duration of your time as an athlete. And to have that disrupted and that whole process thrown on it upside down, it was really confusing and challenging for some athletes. So I just want to normalize that for Colton and for anyone else that's experiencing that right now, that it's not just an easy black and white question for a lot of folks. And I think I think moving forward, we, you know, in my field, we're still trying to really understand now and understand experiences, you know, over the past month emotionally and mentally for our athletes. We some new research came out from the NCAA with their student athlete COVID-19 well-being survey, and the numbers are pretty significant that over 33% of athletes, this was 37,000 athletes surveyed across the country. So over 33% had sleep problems, over 25% experienced sadness and loss. And then 10% of those, just about 10%, experienced such difficulties that they had a hard time functioning on a daily basis. So we're still trying to kind of figure out what's going on now before we can even move forward. But I know my peers across the nation we're trying to just keep it good, well connected with our athletes, understanding their needs, understanding their current status, so that we can work with them transitioning back, help them manage those fears, the excitements, the apprehensions, whatever they may be feeling. We need to meet them where they are so that we can walk with them as we move closer to this reintegration.
Okay, I wanted to get to this, and we have noticed, and I think anybody who has any experience with youth sports knows this, it starts there. I mean, the kids can lose a baseball game, say 5-4, bottom of the sixth inning, and the kids within a minute or two are about, where are the snacks? The coaches and the parents don't have that resiliency. I see that in high school and even the college coaches. I'm on team buses. Players are over it. Coaches, maybe not so much. David, how do you deal with that when coaches have issues?
Yeah, well, you know, there's no question. I mean, I know when this first went down, the first thing I did is I called every head coach just to see how they were doing and just to check in, really, because they're used to going a million miles. You know, they're competitive by nature. They have passion for what they do. They're used to being around their teams, their players, their staffs, and all of a sudden that's taken away. So, you know, we have head coach meetings and we have all departmental meetings, and when I'm having those meetings, what I'm trying to do as much as you can, and since we're socially distanced, is looking at everybody to see, you know, how their body language is. So it's a lot of check in. We're fortunate. We've got some great coaches who get it. They're you know, I think they're also strong enough to know if they need help, they'll reach out for it. I mean, that's the key. We have to be enablers to say, hey, we all might need help or to talk to somebody, and we provide that for our athletes, but we also have to give it for ourselves too. And that's just not coaches, that's administrators, that's our staff, that's really everyone.
Well, Chris, you're not only an administrator, but you're a coach and you're a parent. And I think you probably have a unique perspective on that resilience that might be greater with kids than coaches and parents.
Yeah, it kind of seems like my son is made for this pandemic, but I mean, he's enjoying his time at home. I'm sure he wishes he could play baseball, but it doesn't seem like it affects him as much as it affects me. So, I mean, all I can think of is that this is a new normal. It's new for everybody. I only can reach for my experience as a parent and a coach and use that. I'm hoping that when our coaches and athletes return, that they can rely on their life experiences and leadership skills to help them navigate this. And just everyone has to remember it's not an easy time to deal with it. And we're all trying to come up with guidelines and principles to help them. And I guess if they really need help, they can always, I'll get Annie's number and then I'll refer them all to Annie after this.
Well, Colton, you seem to be a guy who moves into the net. You stay in the now and move to the future quickly. Was that true for all of your teammates, or did you notice differences?
There were certain emotional differences. Everyone takes time to process things differently. And even amongst a collective group of athletes that are very like-minded, our team culture is built because we have so many like-minded, talented people. but there are similarities and differences between us. And I feel that at this current stage, each and every one of us has certainly moved into the realm of holding each other accountable and keeping our communication amongst each other good to make sure that we're taking steps in the right direction, because we want to be putting each other and helping each other become more successful on a daily basis. But certainly when in the initial outbreak and the initial decision to cancel our season, there were very discouraging moments throughout the team and individuals among it.
Annie, in terms of resilience, not only the difference between maybe coaches and players, but even between players, even within sports, how big were the differences you were seeing?
You know, one thing that has really struck me throughout this whole thing is I always knew athletes were some of the most resilient people on earth. And I learned that they're even more resilient than I knew them to be. So I've just been really impressed with their resiliency. Now, some of the coaches who they were saying, I haven't not coached in 35 years. I was talking to my mom earlier. She's in the volleyball world here in Kansas. And she said, it's been 40 years since I haven't done volleyball in a summer. And so some people don't, I mean, their whole life is disrupted and aren't sure what to do with themselves. But, you know, the youngsters who are in it, they seem to be able to be, for the most part, rolling along with this.
One of the things, and this is, I suppose, a curveball of sorts, because I'm wondering, what are the problems with reopening, with coming back? I mean, not only logistical, but all the things that could occur when you bring sports back. And David, I'm sure you're spending most of your waking hours on this.
Yeah, I mean, you got to look at it from so many different avenues. I mean, there's obviously making sure the student athletes are mentally and physically prepared to compete, that they're having enough conditioning time. I mean, they haven't been able to work out like they normally do, or be with their teams. So that's a big factor. Then there's the whole aspect as we open up, you know, making sure we have the right protocols in for safety, for health and wellness reason, that, you know, they're coming in, they're getting their temperature checks, they're doing their questionnaire, they've done their quarantine if you're in Hawaii, you know, all those factors. And then there's the, you know, as we look at opening up for fans, how do we do that in the safest and healthiest manner and put ourselves in position to maximize that possibility? So there's a lot of different areas, and it really does start with the student athlete, but the things we do around the student athletes is also going to protect them and keep them safe and healthy, and also help us to, you know, candidly generate funds that we need to keep the program going at the level it's at.
I wanted to, you know, kind of move and to Chris on this one, and just tell me what your thoughts are.
Yeah, so I think I share the similar viewpoints to Dave. I know we have our work cut out for us as well, get oriented to this new normal. We're developing policies and guidelines in place for parents, coaches, officials. We have to deal with event management stuff. And I know that there's going to be major problems in officiating numbers, because I think there's going to be hesitation on some of them to come back. We're going to have transportation issues. We're going to have budget, financial issues. But I guess we just have to work through it. I mean, we've always found a way in Hawaii to save high school sports. And I know that we'll be strong and find another way to do it again.
One of the Colton, interesting for you too, because you know you're going to be back. You're one of the seniors that has agreed to come back and play, strive for a national championship. What are your concerns going forward?
Going forward, certainly the fact that Hawaii is an extremely special place to me, and the people of Hawaii are even more so important. And getting to compete in front of them is certainly an opportunity that may not come to pass this next year, given the practices of social distancing. And for me, that's the main concern, is getting to, or not being able to compete in front of the fans that support us and have had our backs since the day that we entered the program.
Annie, you are going to be dealing with athletes, I'm sure, and one of the points of discussion now is going to be how do we do this without fans? I think it's sort of one of those Brave New World things.
Yeah, I think you're right. And something that I've been thinking about over the past few days is, you know, the use of touch in sport is so important. I mean, some sports are literally contact sports, others not so much. But then we have the high-fiving, the coming together in huddles, the fans high-fiving. I mean, sports kind of gives permission for all humans, all age, all genders to touch each other and celebrate and connect in that way. And if, you know, so that's kind of a special part of sports that might be taken away, and that'll be interesting to see. But as we come back, all of our athletes are getting tested and they're going through the quarantine, and we're doing daily temperature screens. And it's just, you know, I know that when I walked up to the building, I'm like, oh, they're going to take my temperature. And what if it's over? I mean, it's a hot day out. What if that spikes it? And it's like, just kind of that. I feel fine. Haven't been exposed to anybody. And yet still, I'm kind of like angsty walking up there thinking I'm about to be busted for, I don't know what. And so I think that kind of, when you're getting swabbed and your temperature taken, you kind of feel probed and prodded at. And so it kind of just increases the angst of it all.
Well, I want to again take an opportunity. If you're listening, you may have a question for one of our panelists, or maybe even a couple of them. So the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen is the one you go to. And if you type in that question, we're going to get to it. And we'll give our various panelists an opportunity for it. There's a couple of things I think that go on here. And I thought we would take a crack at this, because you can talk generally about the importance. Everybody who's here on this panel has had a life, essentially, in sports. To have it cut away, because put your fan hat on. How disruptive was it to your life to not be doing the things you'd normally be doing this time of year? David Matlin, I know you'd be watching a lot of college baseball right now, and Major League Baseball.
Yeah, no question. I mean, I've obviously my whole life, going back to when I was born in Honolulu, my dad was the AAA general manager of the Islanders back then. I've been around a ballpark or a facility, you know, constantly, and I'm struggling with that. I'll be honest. I'm used to being at our events. I mean, the best part of my job is going to all the events and watching Colton and his fellow student athletes perform. I mean, that's fun. And even when I'm not doing that, you know, you grow up in this business. You know, your father worked in it. It's always a part of you. So right now, you know, you have to. It's healthy in some ways. You're finding other outlets, but I really do miss it, and I am struggling with that, and I really can't say how much I'm looking forward to getting back to it. You know, to getting back to the new normal and watching our athletes compete.
How do you fill the hours? How have you been filling those hours that might have been spent going to games and watching sports?
Yeah, well, I've been filling those hours on Zoom calls, to be honest, with 130 FBS ADs and Big West and Mountain West conferences and public health sectors. And so they have been being filled and candidly reading a lot. I mean, you always try to read a lot, but there's so much information, and you're trying to keep on top of it. And you know, I'm blessed that I have a great team. And what I've realized is, gosh, I have to be better at trusting them and empowering them, because gosh, this is such a big job, and we really have people who really care and really know that their role is to support the student athletes, and even in Hawaii, to be a program that's like that shining light, that inspiration for our community.
Chris, you are now sort of having to just do one of your jobs, because it's mostly your real job, the HHSAA, because, you know, the whole bit about coaching and taking those youngsters through softball, et cetera, that's gone. How are you filling your days, and how much do you miss the TV sports, for example?
Yeah, I think the ironic thing about this whole pandemic is it would have been a lot easier if there's sports on TV for us to watch and have something to do. What I found is I've started turning into my dad. I mean, I garden. I don't even like to eat fruits and vegetables, but we're raising them now. There's a lot of stuff, and then I do Zoom calls and stuff too. I try to get my son and my daughter to hit a ball in the net in the yard, but they don't. I'm thankful that the mayor opened the golf courses because I get to golf at least once or twice a week too. So that's helped. But yeah, other than a lot of planning, Zoom calls, it's been mostly like that.
Well, Colton, when you are as serious about volleyball as you are, I don't know how much time you cross-train with other sports or what other sports you have primary interest in.
So during this time, typically I've been focusing a lot more on the mental side of things and training the inner game, I believe it's called. And so I've been reading a lot more, watching a lot more film through our Volumetrics portal, and just watching, honestly, just a lot of athletes that I admire. I'm watching their movements in slow motion, and I'm trying to break down and kind of just analyze how efficiently they're using those movements, and seeing if I will be able to incorporate that into my game in the future. And then on the recreational side, of course, I've been able to now go to the park and play basketball and actually get out in the water and surf a little bit and just kind of enjoy being outside and spend more time outside.
You have pretty good hops. I'd imagine some of you volleyball players, maybe Aron Ganat, the basketball coach at UH, could take a look at you. Let me get to Annie, because Annie, now, for those who don't know, Annie was a walk-on basketball player at the University of Notre Dame, which is a hugely high-powered program. And so while she didn't get as much playing time as she would have liked, I think it's fair to say that sports have always been a part of your life. It's no mystery, I don't think, that you ended up in the job you had.
Yeah, and I have a story about that. My family lovingly referred to me during college as Ruby. I don't know if anyone's seen Rudy, the football player of Notre Dame. So I was Ruby. Thank you very much. Yeah, I've always been involved in it. And now, that I'm older, our summers are filled with watching my nieces and nephews play. And it's been really challenging to just not have the options. We have a beautiful new baseball facility built here, and we're so excited to take the kids out to enjoy the facilities and enjoy the team. And so there's a bit of, okay, what next? It has been a nice pause to help me kind of organize myself professionally and, doing some odds and ends there. But really, and here in principal is what the cornerstone of what I try to teach my athletes is about mindset. How can we look at this situation as an opportunity? How can we not fear it and not focus on the negatives, but find some positive aspects of it? So I've been spending every day with my 1-year-old, my 3-year-old, and we've had precious moments that I wouldn't have gotten to experience otherwise. So I've been very, very fortunate for that as well.
Let's we did talk about some of the logistics of coming back. And obviously, David, you're concerned. Is there a football? Is there a women's volleyball start? Does Wahine soccer get going? In terms of your view, long-range view, of how this is going to affect college sports generally. Because I think when you mention the financial issues, they're everywhere. I mean, it's not just here. Where do you see this thing going?
Was that for me, Bobby?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, there's no question, there's going to be a new normal. And this isn't, I don't personally believe that this is going to be just like a 1-year change. I mean, we're going to have to make some adjustments. And, I do think these challenges bring up opportunities and maybe to right size collegiate athletics too. I think there's opportunities for that and focus on what's really important to the student athletes and to the athletic component of it. We all want to compete at the highest level in the classroom, in the community, and on the court, on the field of play. But I do think college athletics, there's some room for improvement, and I think this might force some of that. So I do look at this as an opportunity for all of, whether it be for all of Division I, for any collegiate athletic program, to really do some things maybe out of necessity, but maybe some of the things we should have been doing that we should have done without needing to.
Chris, do you have any apprehensions about Hawaii high school sports returning at the levels that we've all been enjoying it?
So I've been going through ups and downs about that. So kind of like I think that it made everyone appreciate high school sports. So I can see a resurgence when this all clear sounded. But until that point, I think people will do what it takes to happen. But I kind of see like high school sports in Hawaii is the big thing besides University of Hawaii. And I can see it happening again. And I feel like in 2 or 3 years or 1 or 2 years or hopefully sooner that you'll see those big crowds and everything come back.
One of the things I think a lot of people enjoy, Hawaii high school football often brings in big national powerhouses to play some of Hawaii's better teams. They sometimes travel to the mainland. I'm guessing, at least for this upcoming season, that's got to be on hiatus.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if any high school team is going to play any out-of-state team in the fall, and it might carry over to the winter and spring. But yeah, we've been fortunate. Like we have some powerhouses in high school football, and then we've attracted attention from like the Geico National Bowl. We had a team playing that for the first time, and yeah, it's good exposure for Hawaii. So we have to get back to being able to expose our high school kids to playing on that level.
You know, somebody just pointed out, by the way, the comment that's gotten everybody, you guys, I admire, you can seem like you're looking at us and you're typing, but the thing about turning into your parents has just gotten everybody going here on the panel. And if you have a question on that or a comment on that, hit your Q&A button, because we can certainly address. I think that's really true. It's one of those things no one talks about, but it's absolutely true. All the warnings were all, I mean, I can't even believe the things I hear myself saying at home. So, I mean, this is part of the pandemic protocol, let's call it. The Colton, you obviously are looking to win a national championship. I kind of think that maybe it's a little different for and I think there's a couple of sports at the University I sort of felt like they were in the running. Certainly water polo. I mean, we got really good swimming and diving, and I'm guessing that some of those athletes both feel more pressure and also maybe miss the idea of not having had their chance.
Yeah, I think certainly given the circumstances of this year, it was an opportunity that none of us had control over. We couldn't really see what the ultimate outcome was going to be regarding the national championships for the respective spring sports. And I think that individually, my team, for instance, is not looking at this year as additional pressure, more so as additional opportunity to do things right and to make sure that we take the necessary steps to put ourselves in positions to be successful and better the result of this year, and take it more seriously and enjoy it more, and enjoy this final hurrah that we're about to embark on.
Okay, I am getting to the point where we are ready, I suppose, to start taking some questions. So what you want to do is get that Q&A button going, type us in a question, and as soon as I see them, and you can specify a panelist that you might think is going to be dealing with what you want to ask, and otherwise we can just kind of pass it around and see who it works for. While we're waiting for those questions, and I'd love to see some of them, I know that, David, you are getting asked endless questions. I know this is the big one. Are we going to play? How many times have you been asked, are we going to play football this year? I'd like to have $1 for every time you had that question asked.
Yeah, and I pretty much, the honest answer to that is, we really don't know. But here's the reality. I'm optimistic where we're headed right now. By where the trend is going on. So I believe that we will play. The question is, what will it be like? What will it be like? I think it will be different. We need to focus on the fan experience. If we're able to have fans, we need to make sure that our student athletes, as they're traveling in a bubble, they're traveling safely. There's a lot of protocols. So I'm optimistic. I know that none of us can really answer that question for sure, but I think we're trending in the right direction. And like I said before, our job is to be implementers. So we're getting great plans across the country at every program, and to do this in a healthy and safe manner for everyone involved, because there is so much value to live sports and to collegiate football, soccer, volleyball. You can go down the list for all of our sports. And frankly, football is a very impactful financially too. So that does, weigh into it. But we got to focus on the health and safety.
Okay, here's our first audience question, guys. It was watching these European soccer games. People are noticing that they really haven't stopped the high-fiving, the touching each other. Are those things going to be, I guess the first thing is, are those going to be legislated out of high schools or NCAA activities? And I don't know who could take that first one. Annie, I mean, you're going to be dealing with lots of athletes. Do you think we're going to get some kind of, maybe more than a guideline on that?
You're regulated. I mean, you could tackle him, but you can't high five him. I just don't, doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And but I do know that there are something, like I heard my niece just played a softball tournament and they didn't shake hands after, and they had limits on how many people could be in the dugout at one time. Whether or not they were enforced or who was supposed to be enforcing it, I have no idea. My sister's holding open gyms for high school volleyball, and they're limiting number of people that are in there at a time, only using a limited amount of volleyballs at a time so they can maintain cleaning. But this is a tough one. I'm glad I don't have to make these types of decisions.
Colton, I want to get you on this because one of the things I notice about volleyball, like even if a guy like serves it long, and the other, and it's basically side out to the other guys, or a guy gets roofed, everybody's high-fiving him. It's like, wait a minute, that's supposed to only be when you do something good. How does that, what happens in volleyball with that? Do you think it's going to stop, or do you think people just, it's natural, it's emotional, and they can't help themselves?
I think, yeah, exactly as you just put, I think it's uncontrollable. Volleyball is an extremely emotional sport, and that's just a physical display of the emotion, is giving your teammate a high five or a chest bump, for instance. And I've actually never witnessed another sport that gives so many frequent high fives. It's interesting, but it's just it's more unconscious than anything. I'm not thinking about going to high five the person. It's more just response to action. And yeah, I'm not sure how that's gonna be moving forward. Maybe a lot more fist bumps or elbow jabs, or you never really know.
I gotta say, the elbow, I mean, I can even live with fist bump, but the elbow, I don't know, that just doesn't work for me. I'm just saying. Let me get to this. We have another question from the audience, and it's basically this. During the pandemic, kids and parents have been basically locked in their homes, and now the communities are slowly, and it is slowly, opening up where kids are having, some of them are having a hard time returning to the field because they love being on their devices. I got a little bit of this in my house. I mean, anybody want to take a crack at this? How do you get the kids out of the house and back active?
Well, how good are your negotiating? How good are your negotiating skills? I'm not sure. I would encourage, but in seriousness, I would encourage maybe setting these boundaries. Not saying, okay, that's it, no more devices for the rest of the day. How about, okay, for like limiting the time first by 30 minutes, then by an hour, just kind of slowly moving those boundaries back. Or if you want to get radical, just shut the Wi-Fi off and see how they like that.
Bobby,
go ahead.
You can tell them that if they don't get out of the house, they're going to turn into their parents.
That'll do it. Instant action. David, your kids are really adults now, so I imagine these things aren't as, they'll be contemplating in the future what they're going to be doing with theirs, presumably.
Yeah, I'm probably not the best person to ask this question because I'd probably go a little more old school. I like the Wi-Fi.
Sorry, I do.
Yeah, but yeah. So I will defer to people who are probably more in tune with this than I.
I have to tell you, I have a 15 now and a 17. And when my wife wants to threaten them with taking away the cell phone, they give her the look like, really? It's like, I don't know if how effective that's going to be anymore. Okay, we want to remind you, you have an opportunity right now to ask a question. And go ahead, I got another one. Okay, mentally, are college athletes ready to compete on the field or court after this 3 months of COVID-19, the worry and everything on the news? And Annie, I got to go to you first on this one.
Yeah. And what we're seeing is, the fear of anything is going to kind of trigger a fight or flight response. And when the thing we're afraid of is invisible, we're kind of always navigating at this kind of lower level fight or flight existence. And that can lead to energy depletion, exhaustion, sleep disruptions, appetite changes. And so what we need to do is really assess the mental wellness of our athletes when they come back, and identify in what ways they're lacking, what their needs are, and get them up to a level of functioning in the big three areas: exercise, sleep, and appetite, to get their bodies to a place where it's even safe to resume training the way they're used to training. And we have some other stressors happening in the country right now too, so that we're kind of heightened in multiple ways, and we got to get that baseline down to normal functioning before we can then start to push them mentally and physically, in my opinion.
Colton, do you anticipate with the people around you, because you're in the sports community as well as not just the volleyball player, all the other athletes, are you seeing potential problems with coming back to play?
I definitely agree with what Annie said in regards to taking precautionary measures and addressing the emotional, physical, and mental needs of the athletes before resuming play. Just from an individual perspective, though, I feel that I'm ready to rock and roll. I've had my time to kind of exhume the grievance or cleanse, I guess, of whatever remorse I was going through, and now I feel that I've taken steps to make actually this pandemic the most productive time of my life. That's what I set out to do. That was my intention for this pandemic, was to make it meaningful, to have intention behind the actions that I'm committing on a daily basis. And I certainly am ready to resume play and resume action. However, I definitely agree that there are precautionary measures that need to be taken, and it's best for the athletic department as a whole to guide their athletes along these necessary steps moving forward.
Okay, I have another audience question, and this one is, have there been any sports that you guys are now started watching that you wouldn't normally watch? All right, I want to start with David on this. So David, a lot of NASCAR lately?
Actually, I haven't jumped on the NASCAR, but I think Chris Chun's here too. I've been watching the Korean baseball with cutouts of fans in the field. I've been watching that anytime I get a chance, and it's I'm starved for watching some live sports. I'm going back watching in spare time a lot of different movies that deal with sports too, to scratch that itch. So really looking forward to more sports starting, and especially our University of Hawaii student athlete sports.
Chris, how about you? Are you watching anything you didn't used to watch?
Yeah, I watched the Korean baseball too. Stay up at 11, and I watched that whole first week. But yeah, if people are having withdrawals, they can tune into OC16, and then they can watch high school replays and University of Hawaii replays too.
Annie?
I haven't even tried. I haven't even gone to ESPN or any of the usual places, because I know that my go-tos aren't on. So unless you count a race that was on Sesame Street the other day as a sports now, nope, I'm out.
That's great. Hey, okay, who I haven't gotten yet to Colton on this. What do you watch? Are you watching any of this stuff? Are you suddenly developing an interest in NASCAR?
Just recently, underwater basket weaving. No, I'm just joking. I'm actually I'm completely obsessed with volleyball, and I love that I play that sport, and that's all I've been watching constantly. So there really hasn't been much of a change for me. I just watch more replays, and if I've seen it already, I watch it more thoroughly.
I was told that this time, because you have the European League soccer on it, that's going to turn me into a soccer nut. Hasn't happened so far, just saying. We are just about out of time here. We just where did that hour go? I do want to thank all of our panelists. You gave of your time quite willingly, and I really appreciate it. And then I also want to do a little bit more thorough explanation of our sponsors. So we have had Mental Health America of Hawaii. They have been for 75 years fulfilling its mission to promote mental wellness through education, advocacy, and service that reduces stigma and improves the overall care and empowerment of those impacted by mental illness. And KS, Kamehameha Schools, founded in 1887 by the legacy of Princess Bernice Pauahi Bishop, Kamehameha Schools is a private educational charitable trust committed to improving the capability and well-being of the native Hawaiian people through education. KS envisions in one generation a thriving lahui where learners grounded in Christian and Hawaiian values achieve post-secondary educational success and become leaders who contribute to their communities both locally and globally. And we also want to thank ANAMI Hawaii. That's the National Alliance on Mental Illness Hawaii Division. It's the nation's largest grassroots mental health organization dedicated to building better lives for the millions of Americans affected by mental health conditions. NAMI Hawaii State is dedicated to improving the quality of life of individuals and families affected by mental health conditions through support, education, advocacy, and awareness. We serve our community by empowering people to confront the profound injustices brought by mental illnesses. I do want to thank everybody, but I do have time for this only one last thing for you. And that is, I want from each of you, give us a takeaway from what we've had, what we've talked about. I wanted to start with Annie on this one. Annie, what is your takeaway from the things that have discussed and what you're experiencing?
My takeaway is, again, that you athletes are more resilient than you might think you are at times. And so think of this as, you know, an opportunity you have, like Colton mentioned, to never again take a minute of practice or a game or a sport opportunity for granted, and to make the most of each moment. And for just people in general, that this is a time to be really compassionate to yourselves and to other people. It's okay not to be okay right now. That's a really normal experience too. And if you need help, ask for help.
David?
You know, I've been amazed, you know, at the number of people that have been reaching out to myself or a lot of people in our department that have truly, really missed University of Hawaii sports. And I guess, you know, being the only D1 program in the state, and the fact that we don't have professional sports here, really, it makes me realize the responsibility that we have. I think there's never been a more important time for us to be community engaged and really to help uplift and inspire our home and our community. I'm real proud of, you know, the job Colton's done, and so many of our student athletes and staff, and continuing to kind of push out from the vehicles, the avenues we have via social media, some fun and uplifting content to really kind of uplift our community.
Okay, and now let's go to Chris Chun.
Before I get to that, I just wanted to thank you guys for having me. I wanted to acknowledge that I think Dave is the perfect leader for the University of Hawaii during this time. Colton, now I've become a huge fan of you. And Annie, I'm glad that you agreed to help us in the future. No, I'm just kidding, but it was awesome getting to meet you guys, learn everything. I've learned a lot of new stuff. It's just, before I kind of was, we do our job, keep doing our job, press along year after year. It kind of was a cookie cutter and fit, and now things have changed and we got to adapt. And I realized the importance of education-based athletics, and it's my goal and mission to make sure other people realize that too. And we've got to get the kids out there playing in a safe way, and we're going to do our best to make it happen this year.
Colton?
I also wanted to say thank you to everyone, and for you for taking the time to converse with me. And I feel that I have taken a lot of information in, learning from each and every one of you, and it's been extremely enjoyable given the fact that this is via Zoom and not face-to-face, and it's a little bit of a different process for everybody, but I've sincerely enjoyed this, so thank you all. And my one takeaway is that I truly believe that this is a time right now to practice patience, and patience in understanding that there are going to be variables that you cannot control. However, that being said, there can also be a sense of urgency for the things that you cannot control. And I think a little extra time and effort here and there attributed to the things that you love and that you care about, such as your family and friends, is very important during this time.
Good job, Colton, and we appreciated having you on the panel, and all the panelists. Terrific job. I think you want to notice that this was the 3rd edition of Life Interrupted, but there are more. And these are the 2 that you can look forward to. Life Interrupted for couples, and then the final one, and they're all Thursdays at 1, next 2 Thursdays, Life Interrupted at Home. Thank you, everybody who tuned in today. We certainly enjoyed having the chance to share some of these thoughts with you. From all of us here at Life Interrupted on Sports, I'm Bobby Curran. Aloha.